Disease and illness take the lion's share in bringing death on humanity. This is accelerated with infectious disease, especially in times of mass infection spreading across the world. The Bubonic plague stands alone as the most superior pandemic to rid the world, infecting the world on a large scale, not once, not twice, but 3 times. The plague is spread by a bacteria called Yersinia pestis, likely originating in the Tian Shan mountain range in modern-day China. It is possible it resides in other areas in the world too. Rats and other rodents can be infected by the disease. Fleas that feed on the infected can become carriers. It is commonly transmitted to humans by the bite of an infected flea and from human to human by air. There are 3 main forms of the disease. The most common, the bubonic plague. It takes its name from the infected lymph nodes called buboes. Buboes are very painful, red and swollen lymph nodes that develop very quickly near the area of the flea bite. After 2 to 6 days, a person will develop high fever, chills, muscle aches, headache, and extreme weakness. Without proper treatment, the bacteria could spread through the bloodstream and a person could develop septicemic plague. It can develop when the bacteria spreads through the bloodstream, causing a blood infection. It can also happen if the bacteria gets into the bloodstream after a person has direct contact with the meat or blood of an infected animal. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. The person can also develop severe bleeding problems, including sudden bleeding under the skin, scattered bruises, blood in the urine, and abnormal bleeding from the mouth, nose, and rectum. The pneumonic plague is the rarest form. It is possibly a different strain of the plague altogether. It happens when the bacteria infects the lungs and causes pneumonia. It can develop when a person breathes in droplets of bacteria from an animal or person who has the plague infection in the lung. Let's look at the first plague, also known as the Justinian plague. Over the past decade, Emperor Justinian had been making great progress restoring the empire to its former glory. In the year 541, the plague emerged in Pelusium, Egypt. The following year, it spread to Constantinople. Emperor Justinian focused his efforts on rebuilding trade routes, heavy taxation to fund armies and war. Unfortunately, expansion and extension of the empire was the cause of the downfall. The connected empire was a key contributor in the spread of the disease. Plague spread throughout the rest of the world. The death rate of the disease varies, but it is recorded to be as high as 70% of cases. Procopius reported 10,000 deaths per day in Constantinople, and that the city smelt like the dead. The first plague has long been credited with being hugely influential in the fall of the Roman Empire, and I can understand that with an estimated death toll at 50 million during the Justinian plague. Lighter outbreaks of the plague continued to around 750 AD. 600 years later, the plague returned in 1347, and to be even more devastating this time around. The second plague, also known as the Black Plague, began to decimate the army of the Mongols while they were besieging the trading port of Kaffa in Crimea. With their forces disintegrating, they catapulted plague-infested corpses into the town in an effort to infect their enemies. From Kaffa, ships carried the epidemic westward to Mediterranean ports, spreading through all of Europe over the next 4 years. There were reoccurrences of the plague in the decades to come. Modern research suggests that the cause of infection was due to the trade routes and waves from Central Asia as a result of climate fluctuations that infected populations of rodents infested with the plague-carrying fleas. The rate of mortality from the Black Death varied from place to place. The population of Paris was halved. At least 60% of the population perished in London, England, and Hamburg, Germany, as well as Florence, Italy. An estimated 40% died in Egypt and around 1/3 in the Middle East. Other more isolated areas were barely affected by the plague at all, including Poland, Finland, and small pockets of all countries. Towns and cities were more affected than the countryside. The consequences of this violent catastrophe were many: a halt to all war and a sudden slump in trade, the reduction of cultivation due to the deaths of so many labourers. This caused a general rise in wages for the working class to encourage labour and cultivation due to the sudden decline in population. It is possible that up to 200 million died from the plague during this period. As many as 60% of the European population died at the time, an estimated 40% of the world population. An honourable mention to the Great Plague of London in 1665. another wave of the plague linked to the Black Death. An estimated 100,000 died over 18 months. Many rich Londoners were able to leave the city. However, panic spread through the city, and out of fear of infection, bodies were quickly buried in overcrowded pits. The means of transmission of the disease was not known, but thinking they might be linked to the animals, officials ordered a cull of dogs and cats. Thinking bad air was involved in transmission, the authorities ordered giant bonfires to be burnt in the streets and house fires to be kept burning. By 1666, the infection rate began to subside, and by September 1666, the Great Fire of London may have put a complete end to the plague, destroying rats that spread the infection. The third plague pandemic began in Yunnan, China in 1855. By 1890, it had spread to the port cities of Calcutta, Bombay in India, and Hong Kong. From here, it spread by boat to all inhabited continents in the world. Ultimately, it led to more than 12 million deaths in India and China, with about 10 million killed in India alone. Most cases were bubonic, with only a very small percentage being in the form of pneumonic plague. In Hong Kong, 1894, the disease killed 80,000 people in a few weeks, before death rates dropped below epidemic rates. But the disease continued to be an endemic in Hong Kong until 1929. Researchers were motivated to progress medication for infectious diseases because of the Third Plague. They were able to create an effective vaccine in 1897 that helped prevent worldwide infection, a huge achievement for medicine. The plague still exists today, with around 5,000 people contracting the plague worldwide per year. Humans are most commonly infected by contact with wild animals in plague-ridden areas today. It is nothing to fear today. Modern medicine enables a high rate of recovery for infection. After thousands of years of defeat to the plague, it appears humans have finally won the battle against the bubonic plague. However, it is guaranteed that pandemics will continue to infect humans in the future. The question is, will humanity be able to overcome it?